Let's take a look and see how easy it is to connect Ask Steve to any webhook or API. So your API on the receiving end needs to be able to take a post request, need to be able to take JSON data coming in, and needs to return a JSON object with a message property that has the value of whatever you want to return, or an error property. And that text string there can include HTML and Markdown links. Now, in terms of what you can send in to your API, you can send in page variables. And so this is data actually taken from the page itself. You can send in user variables. This is data entered by the user, or you can send in system variables, which are indicated by this underscore here. And that's stuff like the URL or the operating system or the browser that you might want to use. So you can write your API or webhook endpoint in any language that you want, as long as it supports this. And so, or you can also use one of these systems like N8N or Make.com or Active Pieces or Gumloop. In this case, I'm going to use N8N to build a really simple one very quickly. So the first thing is I have a webhook. This is an API endpoint that I can call. Let me grab the URL for the production endpoint. And then the first thing this code is going to do is it's going to extract out the leads and the underscore URL. That's the system variable there. And then it's going to send those leads to OpenAI and ask OpenAI to parse those into name, role, company, so that we can write them into the appropriate columns in this Google Sheet. You'll notice it's also going to throw in the URL there, and then it's going to construct a LinkedIn search link so we can get to that person's profile really quickly. So it'll write it into Sheets, and then it will construct a confirmation message. And if we look here, we can see that we are in fact returning an object with a message property and the result, and that result has some HTML in it, as well as a markdown URL link in it as well. Okay, so this API is ready to go. We have the endpoint that we need to call this, so let's give it a try. So the first thing I need to do now is I need to create the Ask Steve skill that will actually call this. So I'm going to call this add leads to Google Sheets, and I need to send in the leads because that's what the API is expecting. And I'm going to grab that from the page itself. And then I'm also going to send in the URL because the API also is expecting that. And that's the page where I'm currently on, so that we'll capture that URL. And then under advanced options here, I'm going to pin this to the top of the right click menu. And then instead of sending it to a model, I'm going to send it to an API or webhook. And I'm going to paste in the URL that I copied from that webhook node over here. And then you can see I can also add more stuff to the header if I need to, like an authentication key or something, but basically it will just send the content type of application JSON. And then that's it. So let me hit save. And now I have my skill. So let's go try it out. Let's close this. I'm on this web page full of speakers here. And let's say I want to capture some of these people. Let's go these 6. Right mouse click and say ask Steve to add leads to Google Sheets. So now it's calling that API endpoint with all 6 of these people that are getting fed through that workflow and that API. And then we can see now the return message that we added all these people to the tracking sheet. And if I go link to the sheet now, I can see that all these people have been added in the proper columns: name, role, company, a LinkedIn search link that will get me to them, and the URL where I captured them all. So you can see how easy it is to call an API from Ask Steve by attaching it to any skill. And if you check out this documentation page on our website, if you go to the documentation and then calling APIs and webhooks, you can see all the details about what's required, as well as all the system variables. So by connecting Ask Steve to an API that can then call other APIs and interact with any external system, you now have unlocked an amazing amount of power and flexibility to give to your end users to push data and write data into other systems, to read data from systems, and to give them the single pane of glass so that they can get their work done without ever having to leave the context that they're currently in. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in our community or reach out to our sales team, sales@asksteve.to.